meeting. Okay, the meeting's now being recorded, so I'll take the adherent of the Risk and Audit Scrutiny Committee on Tuesday the 7th of March 2023. Councillor Buchanan? No. I can see that Councillor Donnelly is present, as is Councillor Fulton. Councillor Gowland is present. Councillor Handybod? No. I can also see that we have present Councillors Johnson-Dempsey, Kerr, Lockhart and McDougall. We have a number of officers present today. We also have present Councillor Convery. And with that, I'll pass you back to the Chair to commence today's meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Elizabeth Ann. So we'll just start with item 1 on declaration of interest. Can anyone advise if they have any declaration of interest? I don't see any, so that's fine, thank you. So moving on to item 2, the minutes of the previous meeting. Has anyone any questions to ask about those or anything to raise about previous minutes? In which case I'll move the minutes as a correct record.
And I'll second them. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Okay, so moving on to item 3. So we're on to the good governance update, and I will ask Geraldine to speak to this report, please. Geraldine McCann.
Thank you, Chair. This is the good governance update for Q3, and it also brings you the local code of corporate governance, which has been updated from last year for your approval. The Council works to the SIPFA Good Governance Framework, and each year we have to show that we are compliant with the principles of the framework and to be able to demonstrate that. And one of the main pieces of compliance is to have an updated local code of good governance. The local code was developed way back in 2018 when the framework first came out, and it's reviewed and updated and republished annually. And what you have before you today is the updated code, which is attached as an appendix to the report. What you also have today is you've got the findings from the annual compliance check against the code, and you have the annual review of the code, as I said before, and you've got an update on the significant governance areas that were picked up as part of last year's governance statement. And these are also shown at Appendix 3 within the report. It's quite a detailed report and the appendices are quite full. But as you will see at Appendix 1, the annual compliance assessment, what it does is it looks at the principle within the code, how it links to the council value, and then gives you all the bullet points of evidence to show how we comply with that particular principle. And that goes through from page 13, it's quite detailed, sorry, 13 to 19 of your pack, and it goes from Principle A right the way through to Principle G. Then you will see in Appendix 2 the updated local code of corporate governance, and this begins on page 21. There's not been a great many changes to the code. What it has is the introduction, which sets out the purpose and key elements. Then there's updates to sections 4 and 5 of the code to just provide additional information on how the code fits in with the annual review of governance arrangements. Section 1 outlines the actions and frameworks that demonstrate good governance, and there's some changes here to align it with the principles within the new council plan, which was approved by council in June last year. And then Section 2 provides links to all the policies and procedures and other documentary evidence that demonstrate the governance arrangements. Some of these links will be updated because, for example, at the Executive Committee last week, there was a new records management plan and retention and disposal policy agreed, and that has still to go onto the website. And also, we will update it with all the budget consultation, which followed the Council approval of the budget in February. These will be done, and these will then go on the web and with the new code, so that the public can see it, and there'll be a little communication about this through Tom Little's team. The significant governance areas at Appendix 3, I'm glad to see that there's been movement in all of these. The actions have been carried out and some of them are almost complete. You'll get a Q4 report in June with the new governance statement, but the bulk of the work has been done at this stage, and there's details in the appendix to show you what has been done. And these are from pages 37 to the end of that report. So taking you back to the recommendations, I'm asking you to note the findings from the annual compliance check, to approve the updated code and to note the progress against the significant governance areas. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Geraldine. Do we have any questions for Geraldine on the report? Okay, thank you. In that case, I would ask the committee to approve the report and note the progress made in the areas mentioned by Geraldine.
I have pleasure in seconding. Thank you.
Councillor Convery, you can leave now if you wish. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Okay, so moving on to item 4, the 2023-2024 Internal Audit Plan. And could I ask Yvonne Douglas, our Audit and Compliance Manager, to speak to this report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry about that. This is the 23-24 Internal Audit Plan, as the Chair said. Committee will be familiar with a plan coming to them round about this time of year. Probably one thing that looks a wee bit different is the fact that it's a full year plan. During the COVID years, we had changed that to 2 6-monthly plans simply because our priorities continued to change at quite a pace during that period, and it made more sense to set our work plan as 6 monthly plans. In 23-24, we've reverted back to an annual plan. But just to give the committee some assurances that that would be the more normal approach, and that's what they'll see going forward as well. So just that in terms of a wee bit of background. Also in terms of background, the report sets out the public sector internal audit standards, the requirement to comply with those, and also the risk-based approach that we are required to take. The content of plans are set out at 3.2 in terms of the objectives that we try to achieve in delivering the plan of work. The report then goes on at 4.2 and 4.3 to talk around capacity, and that's obviously important because we need to see how many audit days we have before we decide the actual plan of work that we are proposing that we deliver in the year. And having decided the capacity, we meet with a council services and consult with them around the content of the plan. And the output from this is what you can see in Appendix 1, and it's a proposed programme of work for 23-24. What I've also attached to Appendix 2 is the Internal Audit Charter. There aren't any changes to this, but I've just attached it for information because it's important, because that sets out the context within which we deliver each of the audit assignments. The plan itself, as I said, is set out at Appendix 1. At this stage, we tried to set out outline scopes, but at this point it is very much kind of initial thoughts around the matter. We do meet with council services, with heads of service, with managers to refine that scope ahead of commencing the audit work. So there is some further work done before we actually make a start on the audit assignment. We've set out the plan in Appendix 1 across 3 main areas, just to give you a wee bit better understanding of how each of the areas of our work feed into the annual report. So we have a number of key year-end tasks. We also participate in delivering corporate tasks, and the kind of main part of our work in terms of our annual report and the information that we use to allow us to write that annual report is set out in the 3rd section, which is delivery of an internal audit programme around core tasks and assignments. I think that's probably the kind of key points that I want to bring out at this time. So if I can just take you back to the recommendations, I'm looking for the committee to approve the proposed internal audit plan for 23-24. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. Do we have any questions for Yvonne on that plan? Okay, no hands are up. So may I ask the committee to approve this internal audit plan for 23-24, please?
And I'll second that. Thank you.
Okay, it's approved. Okay, so moving on to item 5, internal audit activity as at the 17th of February 2023. So again, asking Yvonne to give us her update on that item.
Thank you, Chair. So internal audit activity, the committee will be familiar with this report and also the format of the report. So this activity report covers the period 19th of November through to the 17th of February. And its section 4 starts off by taking you through just in terms of the progress that we've made with delivering the plan. I think the important point for the committee to note here is that we do have a plan in place to progress all of our assignments to conclusion ahead of bringing an annual report to the committee in June. Because there's relatively few assignments have been concluded to a final report at this stage, the performance indicators are attached to Appendix 1, but you'll see the numbers are still relatively low, but those numbers will increase as we conclude our work through to June. As is the normal practice at Appendix 2, we've attached the assignments that have been completed in the period. For the committee's information, there's nothing there of significance in terms of the output. Some of the individual lines have quite a bit of work involved in delivering them, but in terms of the actual conclusion of the work, there's nothing significant to draw the committee's attention to. I've referenced Glasgow City Region City Deal just in section 5 of the report. Just a reminder that we continue to bring these reports as they're presented to the Cabinet, and there were none in the period, so that's why there's none referenced within this report. And at section 6, just an update in terms of the Public Sector Internal Audit Standards Review. The committee will remember that we self-assess our compliance for a 5-year period. And at the end of that 5 years, we're required to have an external assessment. We've got arrangements in place for that to happen. There's been a slight delay in sharing our self-assessment. So we have a wee bit behind than what we intended to be at this stage. But we still have a timetable set out that will allow us to report to the committee in June alongside the annual report. And that's an important deadline that we need to meet in terms of our 5 years. So plans are in place and we will progress that and report in June. So in terms of this report, the recommendations that are set out in section 2 are simply that you note our progress and performance, and the point that I've just referenced there, that you note our delay in progressing the external assessment, but there is the intention to report on this to the committee in June. And again, happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions for Yvonne on that report? Yeah, I don't see any. So can I ask the committee to note that the performance and progress is noted, and also regarding the delay in progressing the external assessment?
I'll second that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So moving on to item 6. So item 6 is the fraud statistics for the 6-monthly update 2022 to 23. And again, I'll ask Yvonne Douglas, our Audit and Compliance Manager, to speak to this report, please. Yvonne.
Thank you, Chair. Again, another familiar report to the committee. This is the 6-monthly, the interim report that we bring around fraud statistics. It covers the 6 months to 30th September 22 and gives you a comparison to the same period in 2021. The start of the report simply sets out how we collate the statistics, and I think the point you probably want to take from that is that there's no difference in how we've collated the figures, so we can see that they're comparable in terms of the tables that are set out then within section 4 of the report. And that's probably the main points of the report lie within those tables. So if I can take you to the first one, table 1 at 4.3, that sets out our our fraud caseload. That's simply the number of cases that we had at the start of the period, how many we added and how many that we closed. And you'll see that the line in bold are the cases that are closed in the period. And if you drop down to table 2 at 4.5, that then gives you a breakdown of those 9 cases that were closed. And in terms of whether the allegation was founded or not, just one to bring to your attention, there's a line there for time delay. You'll probably see this in reports for a period to come. That relates to DWP closing fraud cases because of the time that's elapsed, and that's directly related to the pandemic period where fraud cases weren't progressed to a conclusion. DWP for some of those cases are deciding to close them without further investigation, so we'll continue to report them as time delay within this table. In terms then of the ones that were founded, which you'll see there were 3, table 3 at 4.7 and tells you the source of that. So all of those were external and actually related to theft by third parties. I've also taken the opportunity to set out the findings from an Audit Scotland report around fraud and irregularity, and that's in section 5 of the report. There's key messages there around the, excuse me, the COVID-19 pandemic, the challenges, but I think probably quite positively. There was also a note there that bodies had responded well and that public bodies had taken steps to reduce fraud and error. 5.2 sets out the key messages from the report and the recommendations, and that was around ensuring effective counter-fraud arrangements, make sure that you regularly reviewed those strategies, looking at the specific risks and weaknesses that were raised within the Audit Scotland report, and specifically reference to the SEPA issue around the ransomware attack. And 5.3 sets out our response to that, having looked at each of those recommendations. So you'll note that we're saying that we do have counter-fraud arrangements in place, that our fraud strategy is reviewed, and I'm noting there that will be brought to the next meeting of the Audit Committee in June. We have an audit plan that tests our internal control and governance arrangements, and specifically the recommendations around the ransomware attack and SEPA have already been considered by the Council, and where appropriate actions are being taken. And at the top of page 66, I'm noting that I'll capture an update in relation to that within my annual report. The report then just concludes, just as a reminder, in section 8 of the fraud work that is in the audit plan, and just a very brief update of the progress across each of those areas. So if I can just take you back to the recommendations, and it is just simply that you note the content of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Yvonne. Do we have any questions on that report?
Councillor Lockhart and then Councillor Johnson.
Okay, so Councillor Lockhart, please.
Hi there. I tell you what, just a point. If you look at item 4.3, I just noticed that the cases closed is really very small compared to the number of cases opened. I mean, can you comment on that? Why is it quite so slow?
Thank you. The vast majority of the 142, I don't have a breakdown just to hand, but I can get you that. The vast majority of that are benefit fraud cases that we don't actually investigate. Very few of those are actually within my control to close. So we wait on the DWP investigating those fraud cases and reporting back to us. So there's very little that I can do around those numbers. I would say they're particularly high, and they have been high during the COVID period, and we're still seeing a bit of a lag in relation to being able to close cases quickly. I think the numbers will go down, but they will always look to be disproportionately high, and that's the reason they sit with DWP for investigation, and we can only report them as DWP close those cases. Does that answer your query?
Yeah, I just thank you for that. Can you split it out though, so that we can look at the numbers, the difference between benefit fraud and other fraud?
I'm happy to do that. I don't have the numbers just to hand at this point, but I can certainly give you that as a breakdown just to let you see the pattern and the kind of breakdown of the cases within that 142.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We now have Councillor Johnson Dempsey, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to ask, with regards to benefit frauds, we've got obviously about the DWP here, but do we have anything with regards to Social Security Scotland, the devolved system?
We use DWP just as a kind of catch-all term. There is a split between them. We don't go into the detail because really we're just responding to the information that's passed to us. But I can get more information around that if you want. But we reference the DWP because they're the lead in fraud investigations. But I can get more information around Social Security Scotland's involvement in this, if that would be helpful.
It would be really appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Yvonne. I don't see any other questions, so can I ask the committee to note the report, please?
I'll second that, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to item 7. This is the update of the 2022-23 audit of South Lanarkshire Council and Trust registered as Scottish Charities. Now, we were supposed to have 2 people from Audit Scotland speaking to this, Mark Ferris and John Boyd, but unfortunately they've been unable to connect with the meeting. So I believe, Paul, are you going to speak to this?
Thanks, Chair. I'm happy to speak to this. So this is a paper in the form of a letter that's brought to the Audit Committee, which maps out the 2022-23 audit process for South Lanarkshire Council and the charitable trusts. So the purpose of the letter is picked up in the first paragraph, is to give members an update, some of the issues that impact on audit and impact on the production of financial statements as well are referenced in Appendix 1, as well as the fact that we've got a changeover in the appointed auditor. So although it's still Audit Scotland, we've got a new audit director, and that's John Boyd, and it's John who's produced this letter. So the fact that we've had this changeover, they're referencing it's impacted on the timing of their planning work. So that they're making the point in the second paragraph that the planning work's at an early stage. They're not yet able to present an annual audit plan. So they've included this audit strategy letter by way of an update to members on the progress and highlight of key audit matters. So the letter goes through a number of things. It talks about audit risks. It talks about best value. It talks about the audit fee. And then it talks about a timetable. And then it finishes off by talking about independence and objectivity. So I'll just give a quick summary of those things. Their preliminary planning work has identified 2 significant risk areas that require special audit or specific audit considerations. So the first of those is the first bullet point that you can see there under 3. It says risk of material misstatement due to management override of controls. So you can see a description of that there, and they make the point that that's presumed to be a significant risk in any audit. So you'll get this cropping up referenced in all of these letters that will go to councils and to public bodies that are being audited. The second one is another common issue across councils, and it's about the estimation and the valuation of land and buildings and the process that's used for that. And this is across councils, it's not specific to here. And it references the fact that the council hold land and buildings with a net book value of over £3.5 billion at the end of the last financial year. It talks about the fact that there is a degree of subjectivity in the valuation of land and buildings. They're based on specialist management assumptions. It can result in material changes to valuations when these assumptions change. And what they're saying is through their audit work, they'll pinpoint risk areas to find out which areas are most susceptible to misstatement, and they'll include that in their audit plan. There's a reference there at paragraph 4 to risk of fraud and revenue recognition, and what they're saying is they describe that as a risk that income and expenditure might be fraudulently misstated, resulting in a misstatement in the financial statements. They don't consider these to be significant risks for this council, as there are limited opportunities to manipulate the way income and expenditure are recognised, and have therefore rebutted those risks. So the paper then goes on to talk about the audit of best value, and it describes the duties there under the 2020-21 audit practice. And then in paragraphs 6, 7 and 8, it outlines the approach that will be taken by the auditor in auditing best value. Sections 9 and 10 cover the audit fee, and sections 11 and the table that you can see at Appendix 1 cover the audit timetable. So it's notable that the auditor's working towards issuing the independent auditor's report by the statutory deadline of 30th of September. So that's a return to that date after a number of years of having an extended deadline as a consequence of the pandemic. And what they provide at at Exhibit 1, you can see that on page 71, is a timetable of audit outputs. So that gives a note of what the main audit outputs are going to be and when those will be produced and when they'll be brought to the performance and audit committees in terms of a date. So you can see the main output there being the annual audit plan, the independent auditor's report and the annual audit report. Target dates 31st of March 2023 for the audit plan. So that letter is here by way of representing that audit plan. And then the end of September for those two main audit reports. And they'd be picked up at an appropriate performance and audit committee or the risk and audit committee as it's known here around that point in time. So their letter, John's letter, then finishes off with 2 paragraphs about independence and objectivity. So obviously the auditor isn't online to discuss, but if members have any questions, I'd be happy either to try and answer them or take them back to the auditor. So thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Paul. Do we have any questions on that report from Paul? Okay, I don't see any being raised, so can I ask that the committee notes and agrees the report, please?
I'll second that, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, so that only leaves us to conclude with item 8, and I'll ask Elizabeth Ann to speak to this report, please. Elizabeth Ann.
Thank you, Chair. This is a standard report that comes to each meeting of the committee for noting. The purpose of the report is to advise members of the forward programme for the meetings of the Risk and Audit Scrutiny Committee to the 30th of January 2024 and to invite members to suggest topics for inclusion in the committee's forward programme. The forward programme is set out in the appendix, which is on page 75 of your papers. And if I can just take the committee back to the recommendation at paragraph 2.1, and that's to note the forward programme for the meetings of the Risk and Audit Scrutiny Committee to the 30th of January 2024. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Elizabeth Ann. Do we have any questions on the forward programme? No questions. Okay, thank you. So just to remind you that if you do have any suggestions of anything you want to include, do get in touch. So other than that, I would like to just thank Yvonne and Geraldine's teams and themselves for all the work that's obviously gone into the reports that have been brought forward today, and Paul for stepping in to the breach and speaking to the audit later. And other than that, I think we can finish the meeting now. There's no other urgent business, so we can close the meeting. Thank you very much.